Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. With it being 11:01, we'll go ahead and jump into it. I appreciate everybody's time today on our webinar on what's new on the 2018 software. D3 counts this as D3 Virtual University 2017, but it is based on the 2018 software. We have a session both today and tomorrow, and we'll walk through the agenda of both. If you use multiple products in Autodesk, I really would suggest setting on both sessions. So let's walk through the agenda. So the agenda for today, before we get started in our what's new on the 2018 software, I do want to talk shortly about the Autodesk changes. Most of you might be aware that most products are moving to a collection. You may have a collection today. If not, in the future, your suites might be changing to a collection. So we just want to walk through and explain why Autodesk chose to go with the collections over continuing on with the suites. After that, we will jump into Inventor 2018. Dan Hunsucker will be going through what's new on the Inventor 2018 software. And then after that, we will jump into Fusion 360. Everybody will probably notice that Fusion 360 doesn't say 2018. Ryan will talk about the release cycle of it and why they chose not to have versions of it like they do with Inventor. Okay, so I wanted to talk a minute before we get started on the what's new about the industry collections that's out there today that's available to be purchased. So the first thing that really you need to be aware of, the collections, that they truly are greater value than what we have seen in any of the suites from the previous years. And the reason is the amount of software that they're putting into this, each of these collections, and even the cost structure around it really makes it appealing. A lot of times individuals would need multiple suites to do what you can do in some of these collections. Along with that, there really is more flexibility. If you haven't looked at what the single user or multi-user access will give you nowadays, it may be something that you really want to investigate or talk to your solution executive or sales about. The way they have these structured for single user is it's definitely unique compared to the way the perpetual license worked, but in a lot of cases it really adds some flexibility that user didn't have before. And third, it's just the simplicity. Everybody probably is aware that in the past, whenever you was to buy a suite, you would buy a product like Product Design Suite, Standard, Premium, Ultimate, and then there were some changes along the way. They moved away from the multiple tiers of suites, and they moved just into the collection of software. Once again, when you get the collection of software, really the amount of tools that's in there, it's pretty amazing of what they've put into these tools. And we're predicting that in the future, you may even see more releases of software into them. So let's jump into just the product design collection, which is what most of our customers probably would be utilizing. If you look at the product design collection, you could compare this to currently what you have today, but the products that you get with the product design collection would be Inventor Professional, Fusion 360, those are both topics that we'll be talking about today. AutoCAD Mechanical, Electrical, Architectural, Navisworks Manage, Factory Design Utilities, Vault Basic, 3ds Max, Recap, some rendering ability with A360, and of course you get cloud storage with that. The product design collection, if you look at it, it in a sense blended what we had for factory design and product design together, because now you get the factory design utilities to where you had to have a different suite for that. So it is really unique what they've done. It's really interesting. We like the direction that they're taking this, and I can imagine that a lot of customers will benefit from this. If we do move over to the AEC collection, which is another collection that we can offer, that software includes quite a bit more, including Revit. If we read down through there, we've got architectural, electrical is also in this. MEP Plant, our Plant 3D is in that. Navisworks Manage, we also get 3D and structural analysis for Revit. There are at least several products in here that D3 specializes in, such as the AutoCAD Electrical, such as the Plant 3D. So it's definitely depending on what type of service or what type of designing you need to do, both of these collections will add a huge value over some of the suites that we had before. Okay, so that's really everything I have on the collections. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dan Hunsucker, Senior Implementation Consultant for D3 Technologies, and he is going to go through what's new on Inventor 2018.
All right, thank you, Scott. All right. Able to see my screen there?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, so basically what I'm going to do here for the next 25 minutes, I want to talk about some of the stuff that's new in Inventor. Just my quick agenda here. I want to talk about what's new on the part side of it. We'll talk sheet metal, we'll talk assembly, and we'll talk drawings in there. So I want to go through all four of those, and we'll also, while I'm talking assembly, we'll talk about the interoperability as well as the AnyCAD side of it there too. So to jump over here, let me actually jump to Inventor here. What I want to do is I want to just jump straight into the software here, and I want to talk about some of the features on the part side of it. And some of the stuff I've just kind of picked out as stuff that I've seen that's new, it's very useful. Some of those that it's very simple stuff that's changed, but it also helps save time. So you'll notice on this part, first thing you'll see, I got a couple sketches in here, but first I want to look at is the hole tool. So the first thing we look at here is if I'm creating a hole that goes on these 3 points there. If I came down here and said I want this thing threaded and it's 3/4, you'll notice how it builds into that fillet so that if I were to hit OK, it kind of leaves that little piece behind. In the past, we could delete face or we could extrude up and cut that out. One thing they added into the hole command is this checkbox right here. It says extend start. What that does is going to clear those little pieces out where it has to cut back the other way to clean those out. So all you do is check that, okay, then it cleans all those up so you don't have to worry about it. The other side of it, sticking with the hole command, is if you use spot face, pick these, I'm just going to use, say, a 1/2 inch diameter here. But for the spot face now, we can actually, at 1 inch, give it a depth of 0. So technically it's not cutting anything, but in the scenario where it's cutting into that fillet, we can use that same option. So it actually trims that away. So if we know there's a washer sitting there, we want to trim some of that geometry away. The 0 depth will allow me to actually drop it in there and it'll cut those for me. So a lot of the hole command is just that one little checkbox, but it's going to save you time if you ever deal with scenarios where your holes have to kind of cut both ways in there. Now, next thing I step through here is if I go out and create a sketch in here, notice if I project geometry. So I bring those across and they're coming across as construction lines. This is something, we're talking what's new in 2018. This is something that's actually new in 2018.1. So you got to download the .1 option in there. This one is in your options under sketch. There's a checkbox in here that says project objects as construction geometry. It's off by default, you have to turn this on. But if you're projecting geometry and then you realize, hey, I want to make this construction, if you do that a lot, turn that on. So that way you don't have to take that step to switch it over to construction. It's automatically coming across that way. So that way if I draw something on here, it's still construction in there. So if I go to extrude, next thing we look at here is there is a new option in our extents, this distance from face. This allows me to actually say I want to start on this face and control, maybe it goes 1/2 inch in there. So you can kind of see it's very similar what the between is, only I'm not specifying start and stop, I'm specifying start and then distance from there. You can use symmetric, which is a great thing if I realize, hey, I want that on the origin plane. I could repick that and say, well, let's start that on the YZ plane, and then we can build symmetrical or symmetric from there. So that way we can start our sketches on the face and then start from another plane to extrude from. All right. Now, some of the other new sides of this, let me actually do one thing real quick here. I'm just going to cut a couple holes in here. Oops. And make those a little bit bigger. And if I cut this all the way through, you guys have seen that. What I want to look at is the measure tool. The measure tool, when I fire it up, it kind of looks a little bit different. But as I move over and I pick any geometry, there is a lot more information in our measure tool now. So when I pick that circle, it gives me the diameter. I can come over here and click on radius. Here's the loop length, angle. Here's the center position, the X, Y, Z direction. But if I want to measure from that to that one, we can see there's a lot more information in here. So that center distance from hole to hole, 7.2, minimum distance, as well as maximum distance. So it's allowing us to see all sorts of information just with that simple measure tool. So if I pick from this face to this face, you can kind of see more of an angle. If I click out in the middle to clear it, face to face, I'm getting perimeters, loop length, area on both my selections, minimum distance, and so forth. So there's a lot more information in the measure tool. So we'll go ahead and close that out there. All right, so then one other thing you might have noticed on my extrude, might have noticed it's missing. Your mini toolbar that pops up in previous versions, it's no longer there by default. It is still an option in your view user interface. Mini toolbar, if you turn it back on, it's on there, but it is off by default. So if you're missing that, it is just in your user interface to turn that off. So, all right. Then, next thing I want to talk about is simple that I really liked in here is your parameters. If you're ever working with parameters a lot in Inventor, first thing you'll notice when I open this, there's an extra column in there. It says consumed by. So it shows me exactly sketch one, extrusion one. So it showed me the feature that's using that parameter. In the past, we'd have to pause on that parameter and tell me consumed by and so forth. So this part's nice, but the nice part that I found in here, if you go to filter now, you can filter by features. So when I switch that over, nothing shows up here. But if I go out and click on my features, it's going to list the parameters just for that feature. So if I unselect that and pick this one, it breaks down my parameters so I know exactly, hey, this is that extrusion. Here's every parameter that's dealing with that one. So that's something that I really like, but I deal a lot with parameters. So that's something there. All right, so then next thing I want to look at is one of the big things you might have seen introduced in there is the MBD, which is the model-based definitions. This is the ability to actually detail your part or your assembly in the 3D instead of going to the drawing to do some of that. And this one, they've added that annotate tab up top here. In there, you'll see there's from geometric annotations to just general annotation notes and so forth. So that way I can come in here and say, well, I want tolerance feature. If I pick this slot and actually change it over to size here. So that way it's going to drop in tolerance on the screen. And you'll notice this pops up. It kind of looks like it's in two spots. This one is just for our precision. We can change through those, apply those. And you'll see the tolerance advisor pops up showing us, hey, there's tolerance. And I haven't put a reference plane out there, haven't defined it out there and so forth. But so it's allowed me to add these dimensions in here. Tolerances, we can also add dimensions in there. And if you're used to dimensioning or isometrics in the drawing, spacebar is still your toggle to toggle what plane it's on. So I could actually add those dimensions. I'll drop them in there and so forth. So that way you can also toggle the alignment. So if I wanted to shift in a certain direction and so forth. But then also drop whole note in here. And same, I might toggle that. There you go. So that way we can kind of detail this. We can also add just general notes, leader text out here. So we can add something to that. So a lot of this is getting that information out there. So that way, if you're wanting to do it more on the 3D model and spit this out to somebody with 3D PDF, button up top allows us to throw this out there. And I'm going to go ahead and just let it run here for a second. But as it creates this PDF, it's going to keep all that information on there. So that way, the PDF you'll see here in a second, we'll have all that information in there. And let me drag this over from my other screen here. So inside of the PDF, we can see the same stuff. We've got the front view, top view, right view. So there's a lot of information that's coming from, probably left view is going to be better on that. But so it's very beneficial if you're wanting to do any of those, the model-based definitions in there. So, and it just adds to it. And it's also, you can bring the stuff across into your drawings. So I'll close that, and you'll see that tolerances, annotations drop into the browser. So everything you add to it is listed in there. So, excuse me. All right. So then, what I want to jump to here is I want to jump over to the sheet metal part here. The one thing I want to talk about in sheet metal that they added in here is prior to 2018, 2017, you could start doing multi-body solids in sheet metal, but they all had to follow the same rule. So on this one, you see my sheet metal defaults, same. If I change this to a 1/4 inch stainless, part changes and so forth. But what they did in 2018 is if I want to create a new solid, bring that back the other way. Now I have this option in here. It says, well, follow defaults, or now I can come in here and say, well, I want to make this specifically has to be that 1/8 inch rule. So that way, this one allows me to see, well, it's a different solid body. We can see over here is different solid bodies. We can create neat features on this one if you haven't done it. So that way, having multi-bodies in here but different thicknesses allow me to stay with the single part file, but I can have different family sizes here. So, and you'll also notice that if I change my base back to 1/8 inch, this guy will follow. If I go back to 1/4, still changes with it. So that's the main thing with sheet metal that they added in there, is the ability to have that different features when you create separate solids, follow different rules in there. So, all right. So then, what I want to jump over to is we want to talk assemblies here. Now, with assemblies, there's a couple things I want to look at here, and one of them is the browser. You'll kind of notice the browser is looks a little bit different than what it has in the past. What they've done here, instead of that model pull down, you can actually have tabs up here. So you can have the model tab, iLogic, you can have Vault added in here, and you can kind of see anything else you want to drop in there. They just become tabs up top instead of that drop down. The other side of this is that tiny button right there, that magnifying glass. You are now able to search the browser. So if I came in here and said, well, I want to find any of my parts that are, let's look for ferrules. It'll run through my browser and show me all the parts that have the name ferrule in there. So it's a nice tool that searches in there, but it also does a couple other things. Let me actually just have it search for Dan. These parts aren't called that, but it's actually looking at iProperties too. So if there's an iProperty with Dan in there, it went out and found that as well. So it's able to search file names, but it's searching iProperties at the same time. So that's one of the nice thing about the model browser, and it's still, you can drag it out if you want to. Still same rules, so. All right. Then what we want to talk about is the AnyCAD side of this. If you've used AnyCAD, it's basically being able to pull models from other software into this assembly, but keep the link back to the older program or the other program. So on this side of it, let me just actually go to Place here. When you go to Place, you can pick SolidWorks files. What's new with 2018 is the ability to pull in Solid Edge files. That is new in 2018. But I don't have any of those. I have some SolidWorks files here. So that way, when you bring these files in, this is similar as before. Reference means it's going to be able to be updated by the original software. Convert means you're converting it, so it's as is here. So if I go reference, this one's just a large soccer ball here. All right. So that way it's tied to the SolidWorks model, so that way when they update it, it updates here. So, but then the big thing that I like about the assemblies is one, and it's kind of one of those I'm not really showing too much. You'll see it as I'm doing it here, but speed's always increased with assemblies. Being able to open assemblies is been upgraded in there too, but One thing I really like about the assemblies now, if you're dealing with shrink wrap, they made this dialog super user-friendly. So if you use shrink wrap, this one is now in 3 tabs. It's not all kind of shoved into one area in there, but this one you'll notice is broke down by components, features, and create. So components allow me to control, well, what design view do I want to use? Is there a positional rep or is there a level detail that I want to switch over to? Is there parts that I want to remove? So if I want to remove parts by size and say that soccer ball and smaller, it's going to go out there and say, okay, well, I'll remove them. But, well, what did it remove? The nice thing down here, it's removed 1094. I can click on excluded, and it's going to flip it over and show me everything that's excluded from the shrink wrap. So I can go back to included, and you can see it. So that way, it's just a visual of seeing what's added, what's not added. And if I realized, hey, I do want to use that one, I can just click on it. Now it's back over in the included area. And then same thing with features. If I want to remove holes, remove pockets, chamfers, fillets, all this, if I click on these to preview that, if I detect features, it'll go out here and highlight the parts that it has those holes on and so forth. So you're getting more step through of, hey, let's set up the components, features. So if we're taking this out for a BIM model, if we want to throw it over to civil or something like that, or just simply I want to shrink wrap this and send to a customer so they can use it. So it allows you all these little tools, and then the create, of course, is going to create the part file, maintain the solids, fill in internal voids, and so forth. So they made this a lot more user-friendly in there. So, all right, I'll hit cancel. I won't let it set through all that. So, all right. So one thing I want to show here, I want to actually look at, we looked at the assembly, we looked at the parts here. What I want to do is I want to open up a drawing here real quick. And a couple of things they added in here is when we're projecting parts or projecting our views, there is the preview button now. So if you want to turn that off, you can project those out without seeing them, same stuff. But there's also recovery options. This is its own tab now where you can pull across surfaces or meshes. You can also bring across your dimensions, so it's all in its own tab there. So I say all model dimensions. I'll bring across these. And the same, those tolerances stuff I dropped in there, you can also retrieve model annotations, which would bring in anything we added on that side of it. So it brings these guys in, drops them in there. That's a little chaotic since I grabbed everything, but and then another thing that's very simple, but it's something I always ran across is when you put text out here, especially if I'm making notes, and just put some stuff in here, is the ability to actually draw a border around this. There is a new button in here that is the text border. So that way, if you find yourself always drawing a rectangle around to have some frame, now you've got that button in there. So simple, but it can save you time instead of having to draw it and trying to constrain it to it. So, all right. Make sure I'm checking my list here. But one thing I do want to talk about last here is I want to look at what they changed in iLogic. So iLogic is one you don't get to see too much about in these, but one thing they changed with it that's new in 2018 is your event triggers. This one, if you use iLogic, you can kind of see that if you've used the event triggers, this is overhauled. It's not just one screen that looked like this, actually would look like this, and you just tell what rules you want to play in there. Now you can actually control this and say, well, for all documents, here's these external rules, I want to use those. For parts, assemblies, drawings, you can specify for anything that's opened, you can run these rules, or just this document. Just a sample on this one, if I did all documents or even did just parts, I've got a rule out there that if I show it to you first, all it does is open up dialog box and says good morning, and then it plays a little voice command in here. So if I wanted that to actually happen on, let's see, after opening a document, you can put it on the part level. So that way when I turn that on, if let's say that wasn't open, you'll see when this part opens, it's going to prompt good morning. Would you like to play a game? and plays the sound in there. So now this one is just for fun, but this is something you could actually set up to actually do property checks and make sure you have iProperties filled in on your parts and stuff, but you don't have to have that rule in every single part. You could create those triggers to come in and say, hey, when they open this, make sure you run this. So that's something that is new in 2018, this kind of overhaul here, but it's something that could be pretty useful in there too. So that's kind of my quick run through of that. Hope you got something out of that. What I'll do now is I'm going to actually turn it over to Ryan so we can talk about the Fusion 360.
Thanks, Dan. So give me just a second, I'll get this started. Okay, how's this? Can you guys see my screen? Am I good, Dan?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. So that's Inventor Dan just went through, and I'm switching topics here. I'm going to be talking about Fusion 360 and updates that we've had in Fusion. So Scott mentioned at the beginning that Fusion updates happen a little bit different from Inventor. We don't really have a 2018 version of Fusion. Instead, we've been getting new versions ever since January 2017. So this presentation is current as of yesterday, but updates coming out all the time. So, you know, we could open Fusion tomorrow and have a new update that changes a lot of the stuff or adds to the presentation. In fact, there will be one right around the corner. I've been waiting every day to see if it's going to drop. But anyways, so what we have today is just current, and there's a lot of ways to keep up to date with those. I'll talk about that at the end of my presentation, and you'll see some examples from our blog and some other things as well during this presentation. So my outline, I kind of divided into 3 topics. I have the core updates. This would be a core modeling functionality, sketching, modeling, drawing environment, the user interface, and the web view from Fusion. The environment updates are going to be the extra environments like simulation, visualization, CAM. So I think a lot of people on this call, that might be, if you are using Fusion, what you're currently using it for. We see a lot of people doing their design work in their existing program, Autodesk or SolidWorks or whatever, but using Fusion for renderings or for CAM. So this environment updates is going to get into that. And then I threw in beta updates. I'm a part of several beta programs for Fusion, so it's kind of cool to see what's coming up soon sometimes, and we'll go through some of that. And then, of course, I'll pull open Fusion before long here and actually do some live work inside Fusion. Okay. So first we have the core updates, and like I said, this is the basic modeling functions in Fusion 360, sketching, modeling, documentation, the user interface, and the web view. If you're not familiar, Fusion runs as an application on your computer, but we've also got all of the data on Fusion is stored in the cloud, and so it's tied to basically like a web interface. You can also see a lot of details, do design reviews and things like that on the web, especially if you're using a Fusion Team Hub. So we'll go through that. And on each of these topics, you'll see when I go to the first one, sketch, I got a lot of words on these slides. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these right now. I thought it would be interesting for everybody to see how many updates really are happening. This is since January. This is not a yearly update. This is about half of a year that we'll be looking through. So there's new stuff being added all the time. Fusion is growing really quickly. If you've not paid attention to it, you may want to check out where it's going. So on sketch updates, a couple of nice ones. The fully constrained analysis. So for example, when you're sketching and you add a dimension and the line becomes fully constrained, it would switch colors in Inventor. That's been in preview mode for a long time in Fusion. They finally released it from preview mode, and it's automatically enabled for every Fusion user. We have, there's a lot of new like 3D constraints and improved control over 3D sketching, you know, like spline handles and things like that. Copy and paste sketches between designs that wasn't available before. A lot of stuff there on the modeling updates. I just threw a few quick ones in here. If you're in the middle of calculating a long feature and you know, sometimes the computer's just spinning and you decide you want to cancel that, you can hit escape and cancel that command. They've really been working on that. Also, you can hit play on a file, and it's kind of like rolling through the browser in Inventor with the end of part icon. It'll actually play how that part was built for you, but we can now, you know, before on a long model, we had to wait for the whole thing to happen. Once you hit play, there's no going back. Now we can escape out of that. Folder groups for bodies to allow us to organize our model. That was pretty cool. So like I said, I'm not going to read all of these, but documentation, they've really been spending a lot of time on documentation. You know, output options, just the capabilities of what, you know, you can create, what types of dimensions, what kinds of tables. In fact, before the beginning of this year, we couldn't even do multi-sheet drawings in Fusion, but we've now had that for quite a few months. On the user interface and the web view, more seamless updates. They just kind of added some new tools and kind of retooled what it looks like when it's updating. It doesn't kick you out of the software. It just updates in the background. And whenever you want to restart, you can restart, or the next time you turn on the program, it'll be updated. This is really a lot different from how something like Inventor works. There is no installing the 2018 or deciding when and if you're going to upgrade. Fusion just kind of updates itself automatically, seamlessly. No work to be done by the end user or an IT department. It's actually pretty awesome. That's one of my favorite features of Fusion, especially since we get updates about every, major updates about every 6 weeks, and minor ones every couple weeks in between that. Also, API, they've added some custom palettes. You can do some API work inside of Fusion as well. The web view, we're going to jump into that in just a minute. They've actually added a lot of really cool tools for collaboration. Even non-Fusion users can easily jump in here and you know, communicate and participate in the design process. So just a few of the core updates on the environment updates. We have rendering environment, simulation environment, and the CAM environment that we'll be talking about in the presentation. So on the rendering updates, there were a few really nice updates to the rendering, and honestly, my background, I've been in rendering for a while, so this is really exciting to me. And I thought instead of just showing a long list here, I would just show some images that are actually rendered from Fusion. So if you follow D3's Fusion blog at all, you've seen some of these. A lot of them are hero images from the blog. Most of them are actual renderings from models that I've created or rendered inside of Fusion. So this was like our first intro blog article. If you haven't followed it, d3tech.net, we have the blog link right at the top of the page with the main navigation icons. This is a cool one from a blog that Scott did on Fusion. The sheet metal environment. Here's a rendering from model from one of our customers. It was actually modeled in Inventor, and the rendering was done completely in Fusion. I made this when they added dielectric priority control, which was one of the new ones. So anyways, I know that's a lot of big fancy words, but basically it made the transparency very realistic. So I was excited about that. And a couple renderings of the Autodesk Ember 3D printer machine. So these are all straight out of Fusion, and I'll tell you, if you have not looked at it at all, compared to, for example, the studio environment in Inventor, Fusion is very much easier to use. It's definitely, you know, if you have any need or want for any kind of visualization and you haven't looked at it, definitely give it a shot. I also have just a few kind of non-realistic things that we've done in Fusion. There's a stack of disks, some icons that were turned into 3D, and again here just some logos and icons. So Fusion visualization, there's a lot of really exciting things going on there. Simulation as well. We have very complex simulations that you can do in Fusion, and it's always improving. For example, these advanced materials. I don't know, so I'm not on the simulation team. I don't know what a nonlinear elastoplastic is, but from reading the descriptions of the updates, even without adding new environments for simulation, just giving you the ability to use some of these more complex materials in the existing simulation environment has, expanded some of the testing that you're able to do now, even temperature-dependent materials. So a lot of cool stuff there. Again, on CAM, so Fusion has a complete CAM environment. We've got a lot of new tools that are added in, so you might turn it on tomorrow, there's an update, and all of a sudden you have something like 2D cutting added. That was not in there when I started using Fusion. It is now. It's just a new tool that shows up. This was cool. Create toolpath directly on mesh bodies. I didn't even know that was possible anywhere, but usually if you're designing, you try to stay away from meshes because you cannot do as much with them. But if you have a mesh and you really want to use it, you can machine off of it. Okay, on the beta, the only thing I'm going to talk about here is the sheet metal beta. So sheet metal is coming soon. The Fusion in a browser. If you have not heard of this, there's a version of Fusion that can run straight inside of a browser without requiring installation or anything, just right out of your web browser. And then branching and merging was the data management strategy. So on sheet metal, they've definitely been putting a lot of work into this. And like I said, if you go get Fusion today, you won't see sheet metal yet unless you're in the the limited beta group for sheet metal. But eventually they'll release it as a beta, a public beta, and then anybody will be able to use these tools. So we could do a lot of really cool stuff in sheet metal. I'll pull it open in just a minute and show you kind of how it works. It's a little bit different from how you do it even in Inventor, but I'm really liking where this tool is going. And just a lot of capabilities being added. Browser Fusion, no downloads, no installs. You click a design, it opens it in a browser tab, and you can actually do modeling right there in your browser. So right now it's still in that limited beta, but this was, the last update had this. The last update was about 6 weeks ago, and this came out that it would soon be in public beta. So I'm looking forward, hopefully when our next release hits, any of you out there will be able to start trying out Fusion inside of your web browser. So it's pretty cool. Branching and merging, I know I've talked about that before, so if you've heard anything about it or are interested in that, just so you know, it has been discontinued. They did release this for a while. It was beta. Anybody could try it out. They got a lot of feedback from it and decided that they were going to back up and kind of retool how the thing worked. So even though I don't have any announcement on what's going to be replacing it, I am looking forward to seeing what kind of solution they come up. This is kind of like a data management type tool where you can do multiple designs in parallel with different people. And Fusion is such a social kind of design tool. So we'll see what happens there. All right, so as far as my outline of what's new, that's all I have. And now I'm going to jump into Fusion and actually show some of this stuff. So if you're not familiar with Fusion, this is the design environment. We have multiple environments here. We have several design environments. We have the rendering, animation, simulation, CAM, and the drawing environment. We'll be using some of those. On the side here, I have my data panel, which is all the designs that are in the current project I'm working on. And so I could log off with my computer, go across the hall to Scott's computer, log into my Fusion account, and access this same data. It is not stored on the local computer, so that's kind of cool. what I'm going to do here is go through some of the new stuff for modeling. So right here, I just have a little D3 logo curve, and I'm going to draw a sketch. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the fully constrained analysis tool, just to show you how it works. I'll draw a quick design here, and I'm just going to add some constraints. So we'll go from here to the midpoint. And then watch as I add this first dimension. The lines, the vertical lines on the corners became fully constrained, so they changed colors to black. You'll see the same thing here on the top line. As I add my dimension, it's now fully constrained. And as I continue adding dimensions, more full constraining. So it's pretty cool. Like I said, we had a preview, but it was a little buggy sometimes. Now we got that full tool inside of Fusion. Very similar to what you'd have in Inventor. And I'm just going to do a quick two-direction extrude. Okay, here's another new tool we have, the replace face tool. So Fusion is very good at doing like multiple designs together in the same environment. Right now this is technically a multi-body model. And what I'm going to do is in the modify panel, pick replace face. I'm going to pick the face of the body for D and pick a replace face. So previously replace face would only work with surfaces. We'd have to duplicate that, turn it into a surface. Now it works right there. So anytime you're needing to like use designs to, maybe you're making some sort of jigs or tooling or something like that, this tool is going to be pretty cool for that. It allows you to quickly modify to relate to another piece. And I'm just going to group those together in my timeline. Another thing that was added, if I roll back my slider to before my scale happened, the original sketch for this was actually right here. So I'm just going to do a quick copy, start a new design. Previously, you could not copy data from a sketch in one design to another design. We could copy within the same design to different sketches, but now we have the ability to copy-paste. So pretty quickly, I can get this exact same sketch out into a new file and start creating something similar. I'm going to jump to another file here. So I just have a model of the view cube. And this one is actually an assembly of multiple parts or components, as we call them in Fusion. And so I'm going to activate the cube component. And the rest of them kind of just goes out there, and I've actually started a sketch here, cube, with some rectangles. So they added some tools if you're working in assembly and you had sketches visible in multiple components. They were kind of hard to work with before. I'm going to activate the corner file now, and it has also got a sketch. But you'll notice it's kind of brighter than the other one. So just to show you, when I activate that, I'll overlay some active rectangles there, and you can kind of see the difference. Even within a single component, if you have multiple sketches, we can tell which one is which, right? So we have like multiple levels of shading depending on where that sketch is at. It's much easier now to work with multiple components this way. And of course, since this is Fusion, just like always, if I want to extrude, I can choose to extrude sketches from the component I'm in, or even sketches from another component that I'm not editing right now. It's Fusion. Cross-component design is very easy to do here. So even though the sketch didn't exist here, I've used it to make a body inside of this component. Pretty awesome. Okay, I do want to jump to the next file because we want to talk about the web view a little bit. This is really puts Fusion apart from other design software, I think. If I'm looking in the data panel, first of all, this is new. We've got some categories for our component where we can see, for example, what components it's used in or what components are referenced into it. This is actually linked into another file. We've also got drawings based off of this model. right there in the data panel. And here I'm going to click Open Details on Web. So that should take me to my Fusion web view for this part, or Fusion Team in my case, since I'm using Fusion Team. So here's one improvement. Previously, we could not view decals in the web viewer. Now we can. So I actually modeled this logo into this plate so it would look good. And then right after that, they added the decal view. So yeah, this is just in a web browser. Anybody could view this and see all this data. We can filter out by objects. We also got the ability to use our named views. So if we've created predefined views inside of Fusion 360, they're also available in Fusion Team. Now this is one new tool in Fusion Team that I was pretty excited about because it really highlights the collaboration. So you notice this little comment bubble. Somebody's made a comment. Maybe they made it inside of Fusion. We do have the exact comments panel right here inside of Fusion. Or maybe they made it from the web browser. It doesn't matter where it happened at. If I'm viewing this design, I can just click on the bubble. It takes me to the view the user was when they made the comment. And he said, I hope this isn't too flexible. Can we run an analysis on it? Well, I could either reply to the comment here, or in this case, I want to use one of the new markup tools. So I'm going to zoom in here. I really think that this area might be more of a concern than the strength of this metal piece. So I'll just go ahead and throw a markup on there. We'll do, let me point to this thing. Oh, not what I wanted to do. I want an arrow. I'll point to this thing with a couple big red arrows. And then I'm going to throw a call out, maybe a revision cloud call out situation. And throw in my comment. And when I'm done, I can hit save. So this becomes a new comment now. It's got its own comment bubble. If I click on the bubble, it takes me exactly back to that view. And not only is that in the web viewer now, this is also going to be visible inside Fusion in the comments panel. So it may have not refreshed yet, but there it is. It's going to pull open the image and the comments that I made. And the designer in Fusion now, without even leaving his workflow, can go ahead and maybe jump into the simulation environment and run an analysis on that piece. Okay, so a lot of new stuff with the data panel. I think it's very cool to be able to jump in and do that comment markup kind of workflow. On the rendering environment, I just wanted to pull it open. They've done a lot of work in, go to the isometric view that I have set up. They've done a lot of work in making the full cloud render work exactly the same as the local render. So generally, if I'm setting up a rendering, I can turn on this in-canvas render and get an idea of if my materials look right. Do I need to change the lighting? Maybe I don't want to wait for my own computer to calculate the full quality. But I use this kind of as a testing ground. Now, of course, I could do that. I could let this run for 10 minutes and then save the image out from my machine. Or in Fusion 360, I can just submit it to the cloud. Using a few cloud credits, I can render out a nice, let's see, I'll do a 2 megapixel image here. It's only going to cost me 2 cloud credits to run that. And as soon as I hit render, it submits it to Autodesk servers. It starts calculating. When it's done, I can come here and save it. And another cool thing, since comments is still open here, if I'm looking at the web view for this design, I will also see all the renderings that have been calculated. I'll see all the simulation studies that have been run. I can even see CAM toolpaths. So all of this is kind of tied to that web view. Okay, and also I thought I would pull the whiskey glasses back open. Jump to that rendering environment again. So right now this is just the modeling environment. But if I right click on any of these components, this is where the new property that allowed me to do that transparency that looked really accurate. This is actually a very complex tool. I was excited to see that inside of Fusion. A lot of people I think maybe have an impression that it's just kind of a cheap tool. It's not very good rendering, but these are super high-end tools that we're getting here. So I could start the local render and check out what it's looking like, but here's the full image, the full quality image that was rendered on the cloud on Autodesk servers without me having to wait on it. Looks pretty good. Okay, so I know we're getting close to the end of this thing. The last thing I want to talk about is the sheet metal environment. Now again, inside of Fusion right now, sheet metal is in beta. I imagine pretty soon it'll release to a public beta, and from that point it'll become a full tool inside of Fusion. But right now we can already do some pretty cool things. So this is just a start of a sheet metal component that I've built, and what I'm going to do is create a second component in my design and start a new sheet metal piece. So we'll just sketch on the ground plane, and I'll do a quick rectangle here. Maybe I'll tie the midpoints together for these two edges. Now again, remember, this is another component in my assembly, but that's how easy it is to tie designs together in Fusion. We're going to go ahead and do some other work here. Let's see. I'll go ahead and make this edge collinear with the edge of the flange on that other piece, and we'll pull it out about 2 inches. So inside of Fusion 360 sheet metal tool, we don't have a long list of tools. We don't have a flange, a face, a contour flange. Instead, everything is this single flange tool. It's pretty cool. Depending on what you select, Fusion will decide which operation you're trying to do. If I use the flange tool and I grab an edge, it becomes an edge, a flange. If I grab the closed profile, it becomes a face. Let's do an outside alignment here. Even do a contour flange or whatever the case. So it's very easy to kind of work with the designs and tie them together. We also, so some of the new stuff here, we've got the ability to switch rules very easily for multiple components in a design. We have the ability to save rules that we've customized. So if I pull this open, we have a lot of properties just like a sheet metal rule anywhere. If I've customized it, I can quickly throw it into my library. This library is available to anybody you know, that I need it to be available to, and also any of my designs. So we actually have some pretty cool improvements in the sheet metal rules department there. If I activate my main assembly here, you can see we actually have, just like Dan was showing you with the multi-body environment, you can have different thicknesses, different rules in a multi-body part. So in Fusion, the same thing happens, except for it's actually multiple components in an assembly, but they can each have their own rule. We've also got, finally, the full flat pattern view. So if I create a flat pattern of an assembly, it's going to take me to the flat pattern environment there. The flat pattern environment is just in the browser for each component. So if I activate that component, I've already generated a flat pattern. I can get back there by activating it. And when I exit, I can go back to the main assembly. All right. So that one is kind of a little bonus. I know this is, like I said, it's a beta feature right now, but pretty awesome. I like the way it's turning out. Okay. So anyways, that was my presentation on the updates that we've had in Fusion since January. Hopefully, we'll have more coming soon. Definitely check out the D3 blog if you haven't. If you're interested in Fusion, here's D3's website. Just click on the blog right there, and you'll have a list of basically all of our blog posts. And every time there's an update, we do make sure to post something on it. And the cool things that I like in the latest update, we have different interviews and things on Fusion. All right. That's the end for me. Scott, do you have anything to close with?
Yeah, if you make, I think I can make myself presenter.
Make yourself. Thanks.
Okay, so just in closing, I hope that you were able to find some tools that maybe will benefit you or make you more efficient in the year to come, especially on Inventor. Make sure and continue to watch Fusion. As Ryan said, it's basically on 6-week update cycles or somewhere about that. So continue to look at that product as it matures. It's really amazing, the tools that they're putting in and the speed at which they're putting those in. So I appreciate your time today. Session 2 will be tomorrow. And if you're interested, we're definitely got some good topics for session 2. What we're going to go through tomorrow, we'll go through what's new on Vault 2018. We'll also go through what's new on AutoCAD. That's still a core functionality for a lot of companies. We're going to dig in a little bit to what's new on AutoCAD Electrical, and then we'll finish it up with Plant 3D. So it'll be the same time tomorrow. If you haven't registered, please do. And once again, I appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you very much.